Hey, and welcome back. David Grusch at the BBC. That's rather interesting. I'll play you the whole of his interview on the Today programme. For non-UK viewers, the Today programme is the flagship BBC Radio 4 news and current affairs morning programme that has government ministers and all the breaking news. It's a very important show. It's so important that during the Cold War, nuclear submarines checked if the Today programme was still on the air. If it wasn't on the air and they'd lost contact with the Admiralty, they launched their missiles. It's a very protected programme. I can tell you because I know. So before we hear this 8-minute interview with David Grusch on the BBC, I think it's very interesting to know why he's done it. I think over the last week, David Grusch has been very much under attack. What he says is extraordinary, and it needs extraordinary evidence, and I don't think he's provided it. But listen to this interview. I think it explains what David Grusch really is doing. He's clearly now trying to justify to the world his extraordinary claims. He has an agenda, which he clearly lays out in this interview. Take a listen, and I'll come back with a bit of an assessment.
A former intelligence officer by the name of David Grusch caused quite a stir last week when he gave evidence at a congressional hearing about UFO sightings. He claimed that the US government has, away from the public glare, intact and partially intact alien vehicles. And you'll hear him repeat that claim in a moment because he's been speaking to this programme. A recent Ipsos poll found that about 42% of Americans believe in otherworldly UFOs or UAPs, unexplained anomalous phenomena, and 1 in 10 Americans reported they'd actually seen one. Well, here's what Republican Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett said in opening last week's remarkable hearing into alien existence.
I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. Sorry to disappoint. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this.
Well, I've been speaking to David Grusch and to his lawyer, Chuck McCulloch. First, David, why did he decide to come forward and speak at the hearing?
It boils down to a sense of duty, and an act of, truth to power. And it seemed like me going public was the appropriate lever to pull when it comes to public accountability and emphasizing the seriousness to, different branches of U.S. government.
The most eye-catching claim that you made during your evidence, and the one that made the most headlines, was the claim that the US government has, quote, intact and partially intact alien vehicles in its possession. In other words, it has them, but it isn't telling people about them. Why did you go public with that specifically?
I found that to be very important for, the public at large to understand, their place in the cosmos, their place in the universe. And that's something, I believe the U.S. government should be, held accountable for potentially overclassifying or misclassifying basic science.
But how do you know they have these items? Because you've not seen them yourself, have you?
There's certain things that I have firsthand access to that I can't publicly discuss at this time. However, myself and other colleagues interviewed, 40 individuals, both our current and former highly distinguished intelligence and military personnel that were specifically on these programs. And those that were willing, I directed to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. So the Inspector General was able to interview these people that do have direct firsthand information.
Right. So they have that information directly. Have they actually seen these vehicles?
The individuals I interviewed that I directed to the Inspector General, yes, they have the firsthand experiences, yes.
Right. Which is an extraordinary claim, as you would readily acknowledge. Why, if it's true, has the government not acknowledged it?
Yeah, that's a multifaceted question. It goes back, 80, 90 years ago when this was first created, and they, translated some of the secrecy from the Manhattan Project onto this subject because, they weren't sure how ontologically shocking it was going to be to the world populace. And then two, as you can imagine, it's a Pandora's box for, potential military and weapons development type reverse engineering activities. So they decided to keep it under wraps for many years.
But we're talking here just about the US government. If they've got these things hidden away, surely other governments around the world might have had a similar experience. So the idea that it's a solely American thing is surely fanciful.
It does cross into other countries and other allies, to include the Five Eyes Alliance, which is something I've already stated publicly. The media reporting bias and societal transparency is a little different in the US. So that's the crux of what most people hear, but it is certainly not an American issue.
I want to put some of the doubting voices to you in a moment, but I want to bring Chuck in first. Chuck, as a lawyer working alongside David, what are the legal implications of what he is saying and what the government is denying?
Our government relies on congressional oversight, the checks and balances of congressional oversight. David's allegation at its base is essentially that Congress does not have access to the information it needs to properly oversee things going on in the executive branch. That was his main concern. So he's briefed both of the intel committees, and he's had a 2-hour hearing, 2 hours of testimony last week.
David, can I go back to you with some of the responses that have been aired to what you said? The head of the Pentagon's office in this area, Sean Kirkpatrick, issued a statement last week, you'll be aware of it, calling your testimony insulting and saying that you were never a representative to his unit.
Dr. Kirkpatrick oversaw our activities and what we were doing and the money we were spending. I never said I was a part of the core team, so I believe it was just lost in translation or misconstrued.
David Grusch and Chuck McCulloch.
Oh, I think that was really interesting. Thank you, David. Thank you, the BBC. Thank you, David's lawyer. What do you make of this? Well, first of all, I'd like to make a kind of a bit of a statement about me. A number of you have said, how come a Scottish goat farmer living in a cave in France knows more about UAPs than Congress? Sometimes I think I do, but on the other hand, I don't, of course. I'm just a individual. I've got nothing to do with the government or UAPs, but I smell pseudoscience at a great distance because that's my background. I've worked in TV, media all my life, and I like good science, and I hate, really detest pseudoscience. What is pseudoscience? Good question. Pseudoscience is about saying something which is shite, that's my new word for the day for bollocks, and linking it to something which is very easy and very true. So a classic example is, you know that goats have 4 legs? Pause, and you'll go, yeah. That means that the aliens come from the planet Zog. Well, hang on. Totally unrelated. Pseudoscience always does it. That statement, the pause where you agree, and then an outrageous statement. And David Grusch has done the same. He said, I worked in a classified program. I'm a very senior intelligence officer, and I was party to secret stuff. Pause. And you all go, oh, that's interesting. So that means that the USA have crashed alien spacecraft with bodies inside in a hangar in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Not necessarily pseudoscience. I'm afraid the second statement about the crashed UFOs really does need extraordinary evidence, not just, I think I overheard it. My position has changed slightly as this story is developing. If you are following it, jolly good, although I think we should all really be following climate change right now. But, okay, the UAP story is keeping us all interested. may be distracted from bigger stories, as some people have very eruditely said. But I have three big problems with the story and with David Grusch, and let me just lay them out. Problem number one is, he was a senior intelligence officer. He was party to classified secret stuff. He still is. You can't get away from that. When he did the Ross Coulthard interview, David Grusch had to clear everything that he was about to say to Coulthard through the Pentagon press office, who only have one job because they're American. You're allowed to say anything, freedom of speech in America, not Britain, but what you can't do is mention anything classified, anything secret. And they cleared everything that David Grusch actually said to Coulthard. But David Grusch was talking about classified programs. David Grusch was talking about secrets. David Grusch was talking about stuff that shouldn't be talked about. But they said that was fine. Why? Here's my silly story. If David Grusch said a banana is actually blue, which it kind of is, but that's a different piece of physics, the Pentagon would say, you can say that because we all check. Oops, no, there's no classified secret program that we're involved in about blue bananas. That would be difficult for us, and we don't want our enemy to know. So yeah, if you want to say bananas are blue, go ahead, because there's nothing in our records that show that that's a classified statement. So what does that say about Grusch's claims that the US secretly classified have a UFO recovery team who are actually got spacecraft with bodies inside it? There was no problem with saying that because freedom of speech and nothing is classified. And for over a week, until I've now kind of changed my mind a bit, and I'll go on to that, I've kind of justified David Grusch's statement by saying he probably saw crash recovery teams, which are real in papers, and he probably saw extraterrestrial material recovery, which is true, that goes on, but it's not spaceships. So he could have just been confused. But that's not his agenda. That was my misinterpreting what and helping him to explain why he said shite. The second problem is the USA, or any country. Imagine France or Russia or Switzerland found a crashed UFO with bodies inside that proved that we're not alone in the... Come on, it's a big story for humanity. The USA just wouldn't keep it quiet. They might keep some technology quiet. They might keep quiet how they found it, but the story that we're not alone in the universe... Come, the USA would be the laughingstock of international everybody, so it's probably not true. And three, and this is me putting my kind of UFO science hat on. Okay, so I don't really think that there's physical, metallic, metamaterial, interesting alien craft with bodies inside that fly from the planet Zog to Earth, descend through our atmosphere and land in a farmer's field in Wisconsin. I really just don't think that's true. But I do know that people see things. I do know that there are UAPs, and I have read something called the Condign Report, which is the British MOD assessment of everything flying saucers from the Nick Pope department when that was closed. Let's draw up a document that we can use for future references. When the Defence Minister is asked an awkward question, as he will be, in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, we can look up the answer in the Condign Report because that's our position. And so Ron Haddo, Dr. Ron Haddo, was asked to produce this report, which assessed every single known UFO sighting from World War II to about the year 2000. I think he was missing a few, but I think he did a very, very interesting job. And the takeaway message from this giant Condign report is there's nothing physical. There's something about an unexplained phenomenon that has been seen, starting at Foo Fighters and going all to the current day. And they're not a threat to national security, but they are a threat to the RAF because Ron Haddo says if a UAP, a plasma ball, as he described it, a glowing light, maybe from a different planet, suddenly appears in front of a cockpit, the pilot would take evasive maneuvers. And so he clearly says in the MOD that although there's no evidence that they're trying to kill us or invade our country, they do see them. And I definitely know there are UAPs. There's strange stuff out there. Most is just misidentified, but there's definitely strange stuff out there. And we should be investigating it. I don't think Congress is such the best place to do it. I think science needs to look at what the Condon report and other military pilots all over the world are seeing. Airline pilots, people, you. We've all seen strange stuff in the sky. We need science to actually investigate the phenomenon. And maybe it is an interdimensional being. I don't know, or maybe it's an unknown force of nature, but we need to understand. And David Grusch isn't helping by saying it's a actual physical craft made of metal with aliens inside that crashes into Earth. That's not what people are really seeing, so he needs to stop that. That was a bad choice of words. I wish he was a bit more open about looking at the science of what's really out there. So why don't metallic craft actually come here? Well, the universe is big. Our galaxy is enormous. We haven't had evidence or contact with any technologically interesting civilization outside of Earth, which is really a shame. If they ever came here, they would have to come from such a large distance, I mean, really a big distance, that a life form sitting inside the flying saucer would never live the multiple thousands of years it takes to come here, look at the farmer's field in Wisconsin, and then go back. And when they go back, their civilization will be tens of thousands of years later on in their timeline, totally forgetting who these pilots of the alien UFO are. It's pointless. But it is possible that drones, interdimensional drones, survey ships, unmanned, might be sent here. And I would really think that that was likely. But manned UFOs crashing into Nebraska with a... It's Wiley. Hi, Wiley. Really? She doesn't think so either. Anyway, that's my assessment for today. I hope you liked the David Grusch interview. And I'd also like to say thank you to all the patrons of my channel who've helped with this research, especially a number of people who have pointed out that David Grusch is actually part of a corporation, a company that's been set up in Alabama with a number of the key movers and shakers, probably just to put his funds through for TV appearances, book signings, whatever. But it does prove my point I made a few days ago that there is a cabal. There's a group of people who have an agenda. I think what he is doing and what the BBC interview clearly demonstrated was his desire to move this subject forward. I think he was really foolish to say that it was crashed UFOs in a hangar, when the real science of UAP is still fascinating. The truth is out there.